Hello, Education 1030 students. So just to recap, last week you were working on completing both Chapter 7 and 8. So this was the only time that you had to complete 2 chapters in 1 week. So that meant that you had to complete 2 chapter assignments as well as 2 quizzes. So now that we have gotten through chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8, it is time for us to do another exam and capstone. So what I want to do first is go over the capstone, and then I'll spend the last half talking about the exam review for Unit 2 exam. So let me go ahead and pull up. So to get to the capstone and the exam review is if you were to go to course information and select content, you're going to scroll down until you see Unit 2 Capstone Written Analysis and Unit 2 Exam Review Materials and Exam. So if you'll look here, this doesn't actually start till March 24th, so you're not actually going to be able to get into the content till then. So that will be actually starting on Friday. So I don't know when you're watching this. I'm recording this on March 21st, but on Friday, March 24th, this will open and you will be able to work on your capstone. So if we scroll down, the first section you're going to see is your exam 2 review. Okay, so we have lots of things here that we'll be going over here in a minute for you to do to help you study and prepare for the exam. So the next section you're going to see is the actual written analysis, so your capstone, as well as the rubric for the capstone. Okay, so if you ever want to know when things are due, if you look on in your syllabus, there's a course timeline, and the curriculum timeline is really going to help you to keep up with your due dates. So the Unit 2 capstone and the exam 2 is going to be due on March 30th. So that will be next Thursday, March the 30th, is when both the exam will close as well as the capstone will need to be submitted to Dropbox. So let's go ahead, like I said, and get into the capstone first and discuss that, and we'll spend the last part talking about the exam. So as you see here, I have the Unit 2 capstone pulled up. So this is going to be the same format that you used when you completed Unit 1 capstone. So just to remind you, a capstone is a written analysis. It is a reflection of the learning taking place. So when we're reflecting back on our content, we're really looking at chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. So this is essentially a paper. So when you're doing this paper, it needs to be the same format as you would if you're writing papers. So everything is split up into paragraphs. There are prompts to help guide you as far as what I want you to answer. So remember, when you're doing paragraphs, at least 3 to 4 sentences will be suffice. You will be using your textbook to answer a lot of the capstone. So one thing I wanted to kind of remind you of as you're going through this capstone is not only to use your textbook, to really try to reflect back on the chapters and what you've learned, right? So you're responding in a narrative form, and what that means is that you're making connections based on your experience in this course. So looking at the first part, which is Chapter 5 prompt, this is going to be where you will definitely need your textbook. So if you go to Chapter 5 and open up to textbook, and open up in your textbook, Chapter 5, Tech Tip is on page 124. So to answer this question, really I want you to look at note-taking. So Tech Tips offer lots of tips for you as far as working with a device. So it gives you, on this page 124, it gives you lots of different tips and apps that help you with taking notes. So what I want you to think here is to look back at chapter 5. You could use your reading organizer to help you. That's also very helpful in assisting you in answering these questions. So what it's asking you is really to think about what note-taking style method really works for you, and to see if any of the tips they offered here is something that you use or maybe you already are using. The second part of chapter 5 is going to be developing your career story. So this is where you're going to look back on your career, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the profession or the career that you want to go into. And I want you to search what we call professional organizations. Okay, so when we're thinking about professional organizations, we're not thinking about companies you want to work for. What I'm asking you to do is to look at organizations within your field. For instance, nursing. Say you're going to the health field. Nursing has an organization called NEA, okay? A Nursing Education Association. So this is an organization, kind of like a club, if you will, lack for a better word, that you can join that offers members, perks, and benefits. So, for instance, if you're going into teaching, they have something called TEA, which is Teachers Education Association. So there's lots of different kinds of organizations that you can join depending on your career. Some of them, most of the organizations you join does have an annual or monthly membership fee. So what you're going to do is you're going to select 2 organizations that you would like to join. You're going to tell me the benefits of joining, the cost associated with if you're going to join that organization and being a member. So keep in mind that just because you join a professional organization, that does not mean it's a career. I'm not asking you to search jobs or careers or companies. I'm asking you to look at what kind of professional organization you would like to be a part of. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're answering, but I only want you to pick 2. So you may have to do a little research depending on what kind of field you're going into. A good place to start would be ONETs, because if you go into ONET, it may pull up member organizations that are associated with that career. So that would be something that you would maybe want to search as well. Moving on to chapter 6, we're going to go into the tech tip right off as far as the first prompt. So looking on page 147 is our tech tip for chapter 6. So what I want you to do is you're going to have to actually use the bookstore website. So you're going to go to the Water State website, and in the search bar you can click on the bookstore. And you're going to research and compare costs for the textbooks that you have right now for this semester. So when you're comparing prices, I want you to look at ebooks, which are electronic books, and I want you to look at hard copies. So tell me what type of book you prefer, ebooks or hard copies for each class that you have. So tell me about the books that you have, what you prefer. And then I want you to also tell me the 3 most important criteria that you look for when you're choosing your books or your textbooks. Chapter 6, develop your career story. So what I want you to think back on is in chapter 6, we were talking about how you could read to understand the material or the content. So you're reading to understand. So this chapter really lends itself well to how you can prepare for your college classes. So what you're going to do is you are going to look up and search the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So I have a link here for you. In the search handbook, you're going to type in your career in the box. And I want you to search for the type of reading that you're going to have to do in your career. So if it's have to do with reading stuff, maybe it's reading a lot of emails, maybe it is reading a lot of depositions if you're going into law. It could be that you're reading research if that is a big part of your job. So I want you to look in the link for Occupational Handbook. When you get in there in the search bar, I really want you to type in your career, and then I want you to search about what type of reading is going to be necessary to do your job successfully. Chapter 7 tech tip This section is really talking about saving and storing your information. So if you go to page 168 in your textbook, you're going to see tech tip for chapter 7. It lets you talk about how you can save files in cloud. So I want you to talk about any problems that you could encounter if you do not use cloud to store your documents. And then I want you to tell me what cloud storage Water State provides for you as a student. And then tell me what cloud storage that you actually use. And if you don't use any, tell me that. You could be more specific as to how you do save your assignments. The second part of chapter 7 is going back to your career story. So in our text for chapter 7, it talks about what an elevator pitch is. So just to refresh your memory, an elevator pitch really is a 25 to 30 seconds, so something really fast. It's a speech about yourself. So when you're talking about yourself, you're really highlighting the best things. So think about if you were stuck in an elevator with a potential employer, someone you want to work for. And you're going to network. So network means you talk to people where you want to connect with them to maybe get a job. So if you're stuck in the elevator with them and you only had 25 to 30 seconds to pitch yourself about why they should hire you, what your most noteworthy skills are, what would it be? So what you're going to do is look into your future. You're going to create your own elevator speech based on the tips that you find online and the research that you've done so far in the career you want to work. So you're going to share 3 main points of your speech here. So you don't necessarily have to write your whole entire speech for the 25 to 30 seconds, but I want you to tell me the 3 main points that you would hit if you were trying to sell yourself to the employer as of why they would want to hire you. And remember, when you're doing research on your career and you're listing those noteworthy skills, they kind of need to be skills that the employer is looking for. So just keep that in mind. You may have to do more research to be able to complete the second part of chapter 7. Lastly, we have chapter 8. So what you're going to be doing in chapter 8 is you're going to look first at the tech tip. So chapter 8 tech tip is on page 194. And what I want you to do here is I want you to think about kind of the downside of technology. So think about if you're taking an online test. What could happen to you when you're taking an online test that can negatively affect your test and your grade? And have you had any of these experiences that could hurt you when you're taking an online test? The last part of chapter 8, you're going to go back to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which I have a link here for you. And once again, in the search bar at the very top, you're going to type in your career. You're going to read the page where it says how to become one. And you're also going to read the section in there that says important qualities. The reason I'm having you do this is because I want you to know what's involved inside of your career. What are you getting yourself into? Thinking about the environment, thinking about what is required for you to actually be able to do that job. What kind of schooling and education do you need? Do you need to have any certifications? Thinking about important qualities that the employer is looking for. Going back and connecting to your career story, your elevator speech. And then I want you to think about the registrations that you have to do. So this would be certifications, what kind of registrations required. So for instance, if we're talking about maybe you were looking at doing something in the health field, you were going to have a license board exam that you would take in order to get licensed to do that job. So that's the sort of things that I want you to think about. So that's why I told you to look specifically at these 2 sections. I also want you to think about, again, those important qualities. So do you need to be able to speak in front of a lot of people? Do you need to be able to do public speaking? Do you have to be good with numbers, right? So if you're doing engineering. So these are things that are important qualities for you to have to do certain jobs. And then think about any challenges that might come up that may hurt you or may make you take a step back when you're trying to complete these requirements. And then what is your plan that you have in place to overcome any challenges that you may see, right? So for instance, if you wanted to say you want to do veterinarian school, and you want to be a veterinarian, think about the challenges that could come about. So it takes a long time to do this, right? It's going to take a lot of money in schooling. So this is going to set you back a while as far as like getting a decent income. So these are types of challenges that you might face as one example. And then the last section we're really talking about is your summary of the capstone. This is where you're going to connect all of your chapters together. So thinking back on chapter 5, when we were talking about note-taking, chapter 6, where you're trying to read to learn and understand your textbook. Chapter 7 was really talking about studying for tests, right? Studying, understanding what you're doing. How do you study? What kind of outlines do you use? And then chapter 8 was really talking about test anxiety and how you take tests successfully so you can be successful in your classes. So think about how all these tie in together with your college experience. And I want you to explain how you can use all of these knowledge that you have to make better decisions for the remainder of your college years. So when we're talking about the remainder of your college years, it doesn't necessarily mean just here at Water State. So if you're planning to go to the four-year university or even graduate school, that would be considered the remainder of your college years. So these are things I want you to think about. So that really talks and goes over all of the points of the capstone and what I'm expecting of you. So I wanted to go ahead now and I want to pull up the rubric so you will understand how you're going to be graded. So you know that it's worth 60 points, right? So I have different criteria here that I'm going to be looking for when I'm grading you. So the first criteria is reflection. So this is really where you reflect back on all the chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. And you really address all the questions. So it means you're answering all the questions that I ask in the prompts. So that's the first criteria you get graded on. The second, of course, is grammar. As I've mentioned before, this is not English composition or early European literature. I understand that. But if you have consistent grammar mistakes and punctuation error and spelling errors, then those are things that I'm going to count off, especially if it's consistent throughout your paper. The third criteria is really going to be getting down into what you're putting in your response or your answers. So you have to think about, are you really looking at what I'm asking you and how you're responding to the prompts? Are you putting enough information there to really fully answer my questions? The second area of the responding to what is really going to be your insights and understanding. Like, do you actually understand what's expected when we talk about the career exploration? So when you're looking at, do you know what's expected? Do you have a lot of insight and really understand what you're getting yourself into? Do you understand the content and are you making connections? The next section would be commitment and challenge. So this is really, do you have a plan of action? So going back to when I was asking you some kinds of challenges that you might face and how could you overcome, that's an example of having a plan of action. So I'm going to be looking at that. The last one is progress and development. So I told you the first capstone, I really was easy on you on this criteria just because I didn't have a lot to base it on. So now that you've had one capstone under your belt and this is your second, I'm really going to be able to compare and look at your growth and your progress from the first capstone. So this is where I'm going to be a little bit harder on this criteria as far as seeing that growth, your change of attitude, the connections you're making, those sorts of things. So altogether, that's going to be a total of 60 points available for this capstone. So now I want to spend the rest of the time talking a little bit about the Unit 2 exam. Now remember, the exam is not like the quizzes. You have one shot to take it, so it will remain open. So it opens on the 24th, and you have until next Thursday the 30th, and it will close. I am going to encourage you, as I did on the first exam, please use your reading organizers. Now, I am not going to proctor this test. This is online test, just like before. It has a window of time for you to take it. So whenever you study and you feel like you're ready to take it, go ahead and take it. It is a timed exam. So if you look here, it says the exam opens on March 28th. I may change that. Let me look and see when I have it open. I may change it. I think I'm going to go ahead and open it on the 24th. So it will be open this Friday, and then it will close on the 30th. So that's going to give you a full week for you to be able to study and take it if you feel like you're prepared. So let's go real quick into the Unit 2 organizers and exam review sheets. When you click on it, you're going to see here that I have links to the Word documents for the reading organizers. One thing I want to note, if you look here in the asterisk, there's Chapter 6 does not have a ready link. This is because you are going to use your outline and reading organizer that you completed and turned in and submitted to Dropbox. So you're going to use that as your study guide. That's why I did not put that in there for you, because this is something that you will use that you created on your own. So that's the first thing I would encourage you to do. The next thing is I want you to look at the review sheet. So when I open the review sheet, you're going to see here all of the topics that you will be tested on for the exam. So this is over 5, Chapter 6, Chapter 7, and Chapter 8. So you can go back. I would have this pulled up. You can look at notes, maybe start filling in notes, or go back and pull out your reading organizers and look for these sections inside the reading organizer and study those notes. The next thing you have is I actually put a few Quizlets on here for you. You have a Quizlet that's matching, so we'll go ahead and open it so you can see. So this is just a game to kind of quiz you, to see your understanding, to give you feedback, to see if you need to study a little bit more before you're ready to go ahead and take that exam. So I actually put a few on here for you. So you have a Quizlet for matching, you have a Quizlet Learn review, and then there's a Quizlet test review, and then also a Quizlet flashcard review. So these are ready for you to take, quiz yourself, see how you're doing before you're ready. So the exam's going to open on the 24th, and it will close on the 31st. So that gives you a full week. Just to remind you, you have one shot. You will not have multiple attempts at this test, and it is timed. It is a timed exam. That's all that I have for you. We will not start Chapter 9 until the following week. So this week we will be working on our capstone, and you will be studying and actually taking your exam too. But as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I'll be glad to help you any way that I can. All right, guys, happy studying and good luck on your exam too.